All right, everybody, welcome back to Conspirinormal. Surfiel is back with me this week. I also want to make an announcement that tickets for Strange Realities Conference are on sale, and we have officially begun the countdown. So if you have not gotten your tickets and you're coming to Nashville, or even if you're joining us online, go ahead and grab those. It would help us out a lot. And we're going to start off this countdown by talking to someone who is joining us, who is a new speaker.
First time
speaker at Strange Realities Conference, and that is Kyndyll Lackey. And Kyndyll is in Nashville. She's a Nashville local. We were just talking to her. Born in Nashville,
which is very rare nowadays.
Which is very rare, yes. Yeah, neither Surfiel or I can claim that, actually. So, but she has a book out called Beyond as Above, So Below, Understanding Hermetic Tarot Through the Music of Maynard James Keenan. And we are going to talk about this tonight. So welcome to the show, Kyndyll. I'm very excited to have you.
Oh, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Kiki Dombrowski told me about you last year. And we weren't able to make it happen, but we did get you this year. So she was very excited to see that you were going to be on the conference with us this year. She's been doing it with us since 2020. So,
she's brilliant. Her tarot classes and her books, she's just brilliant. So that's high praise coming from Kiki.
Yeah, she's something else. I was like, is there anybody you would suggest? And she was like, Kyndyll Lackey was the first person that came to her mind. So,
yeah. Oh, I'll have to be sure and pay her really good.
So. We're going to talk about this book that you have written that is about tarot and associating it with some of the songs of Maynard James Keenan. And I'm going to ask you the question that I kind of ask all my guests, really, is what inspired you to write this particular book?
Well, I've been a writer my whole life, and I've always been interested in the written word. And I've always been interested in producing longer form pieces of writing, but I never really felt like I had anything to say. And when I started studying writing as a discipline, a lot of what I kept coming across was write about what you know. And for the longest time, I really couldn't land on, the intersection of two topics I knew something about, but I felt like I had something new to say. So that just kind of lived in the back of my mind for years. And then one day I happened to be listening to a playlist of Keenan's music that I had, built for myself, just a whole bunch of songs of his that I really enjoyed from all his various projects. And I have been a fan of his since Undertow reached 103 KDF here in Nashville, which would have been around 93.
Yeah.
Been a fan of his work really ever since, and have followed his progress through his musical career, and have seen him play live a bunch of times, and all of the different projects and the different permutations. And alongside that, when I was in college, I picked up studying esoterics and the occult, and particularly the tarot. Became a professional reader while I was still in college, and tarot kind of has become the lens through which I view the world and how I organize and interpret information, particularly information about life for humans, for people. And so at any rate, I was listening to that playlist one night, and I started musing on what an about face it was for his artistic expression between Tool, Anima Salival days, and then the switch that flipped when he moved over into A Perfect Circle and they released Murdenal. And anybody who had been paying attention to his music at all could see that it was a drastic change in the way that he presented on stage, the way that he moved, the way that he, the content of the song lyrics, was just, he was singing about love. I mean, what 90s Tool fan ever thought they would hear Maynard Keenan talk about love or loss or in any kind of tender way? And that was definitely what he was doing. And so it got me to thinking about, well, maybe that was his foray into exploring the feminine. And I thought, ooh, that kind of reminds me of a particular station on the Tree of Life. Well, the Tree of Life is related to the tarot deck. And so my affinity and love for occult correspondence really kicked in, and I started thinking about, ooh, I wonder if I could put an album in all of the stations of the Tree of Life. And I discovered that I could. And then I started noticing that there were songs that matched the pathways in between those centers on the Tree of Life. And those correspond to tarot cards and to songs. And so before I knew it, I had mapped out a good deal of the tarot deck to his catalog, using exclusively his original lyrics, no cover songs, not repeating anything, and hitting every major release he had had up to that point. And I was really excited. And so the more I toyed with it and puzzled with it, the more I realized that it indeed was a complete system. And then I had to write it. It was an idea that would not leave me alone. And so for 4 years, I just obsessed over this intersection between archetypes as they show up in a tarot divination deck and archetypes as they show up in pieces of art, namely music and musical lyrics. And that was really what brought the book about. And I just, at the time I was putting it together, it was really more for my own personal satisfaction and my own organization of information. But when it was done, I realized that anybody who was a fan of his music, this was a perfect roadmap to help them learn tarot, because 78 cards is a whole lot of stuff to memorize for somebody when they're first starting. Mm-hmm. So I knew there was a system there that could help people. And then at the same time that it's helping them understand tarot, it's also helping them to understand his music better. Because a lot of people talk about his lyrics are mysterious, and they don't understand what he's talking about or what he's referring to. And this became a way of kind of helping to tie some of those esoteric concepts to something known, to give people a landmark from which to explore and tie their own memories from their own life, the things that they have experienced and the memories they have coded to these songs, to the archetypes in the tarot, so that they have a kind of a ready-made mnemonic system for helping them to learn tarot in a meaningful way and then apply it to their own lives.
Okay. And I want to get into why Maynard specifically and some of the things about him, but I think to start off exploring the tarot itself, and you use a very specific tarot. You use the Thoth Tarot, and you use another one that's like kind of a variation on that, the Tabula Mundi Tarot. So can you kind of explain the difference between the Thoth Tarot, what that is, as opposed to like the one that people would, I guess, normally be familiar with, which would be the Rider-Waite deck?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. There are two mainstream kinds of decks at least on the US market, that are kind of their own subheading system decks. And one is the Rider-Waite Smith deck that we all know. We've all seen the pictures of death on the white horse with the black flag. We all can immediately see in our mind's eye the picture of the hermit standing on the ledge holding the lantern up. It was on the Led Zeppelin album cover.
Right.
Like, these are iconic images that most Americans, even if they know nothing about tarot, know those images. And that tends to be the deck that most people go with. And that is a deck that's based in Golden Dawn teachings. And it was designed to convey those teachings in a very secretive and obscure way. And it was, printed in the early 1900s. I want to say it was printed in the 1930s, or published in the 1930s. And then the other school of tarot that is readily available here is the Thoth Tarot, which was created by Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris. And that deck was kind of a response to the Rider-Waite. And it was with Crowley's own flair. It was his own philosophy that he had developed over time. He started in Golden Dawn, and then eventually moved over to the Ordo Templi Orientis, common, the body that represents the Lema, which is a philosophical system. He imbued his deck with a lot more open, obvious symbolism. He didn't hide things. He changed the order of the deck, changed some of the names. In essence, trying to make what the Golden Dawn had obscured into something that was more accessible, which is ironic because most everyone will tell you that the deck is much harder to learn. But he kind of put it all out there. And there are purists out there. There are lots of people who are Rider-Waite Smith people. There are lots of people who are Thoth people. I happen to be a Thoth people. And that has been the deck that I have used from the very beginning. And Tabula Mundi, which is the deck that illustrates the book, was created by my dear friend M.M. Moline. And hers Tabula Mundi is like a modernization or a modern retelling of the Thoth that contains many of the same symbolism, and then also a really good dose of modern symbolism that modern tarot readers would get, more so than the people, who were living at the time that the Thoth deck was released, I think in the 60s.
Okay. That's a very good explanation. I found it interesting because I didn't know really anything about the Thoth deck. I mean, I've seen it. And it's funny, as I was reading your book, I was going through and because you show the Tabula Mundi tarot, but I found a website that shows the whole Thoth deck, so I could kind of be familiar with that too. And yeah, so it's much more steeped in Thelema, I suppose, than yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it like I said before, it makes some changes that Golden Dawn purists don't agree with, right. And that's a whole topic unto itself. But and it also really does kind of inject some of the philosophical points about Thelema into the tarot deck symbolism. It has less Christian overtones, more Thelemic overtones than the Rider-Waite.
Okay. I was looking at also too Wikipedia page, some of the differences, and I think one of the ones, I think the one we may talk about later, there's one called Lust, but that's completely different in the Rider-Waite deck. I think that the Aeon, that's definitely a Crowley Crowley thing. That's completely different. So I think that there's a few cards that have just like different names and different concepts associated to them.
Yes, absolutely. And the Aeon is one of those. Lust is another one of those. Art is another one. Adjustment. So these are different titles for the same card, and along with the different titles, they also have a slightly different, more nuanced meaning.
Okay. All right. So to ask you about Maynard James Keenan, and you kind of went into like why you picked him, but like what are some of his ideas that you see come through in these songs? Like what is about his life, his philosophy specifically made you pick them? And then there's also an idea that you put forth in the book that's about like the idea of a celebrity as like an avatar, essentially.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a really big nerd of his music. So he was a natural choice because my life is so deeply steeped in his catalog, and so I already had a lot of those built-in memories that I was talking about earlier. And he's prolific. he's been writing music for so long, and he's long enough that you can actually follow his progression from young adulthood all the way through now middle adulthood, and really see the progression of the change of his personal outlook on life and the world. You can see him move from spaces of youthful aggression and bitterness and resentment of power over time to moving now toward stances that look much more like a plea for unity, a call for coming together and seeing the divinity within ourselves. Like there's this real progression of a soul that is very apparent in his music. And you could do this with any artist that's been writing long enough.
Sure.
Because that's really all tarot is a compendium of archetypes. Well, and those archetypes are present in most all cultural artifacts. So he's not unique. And at the same time, he is also unique on the other hand, because he does incorporate a lot of occult concepts into his music. He does write lyrics that refer to occult ideas, such as the planetary force of Saturn that he invokes in The Grudge from Tools Lateralis. There are several songs where it's just cram packed with symbolism and concepts, and in short, it was just easy. It was easy to make those connections and make them in such a way that people would not just be learning a rote, memorized meaning of what the card means. Oh, the two of discs means change. It's something more nuanced, something deeper than that. So that when you learn the card that way and you actually start reading, you're getting a much fuller, richer interpretation of the cards. So to me, he was just a natural choice.
Is there an idea here that things can be created without necessarily having 100% intention to correspond or transmit some kind of occult knowledge, but they end up actually doing that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible to transmit that information without intending to convey correspondence and things like that, but just talking about life. And it just so happens that it fits a particular card. He's written so many more songs than 78. There are plenty of other songs that, in order to tell their story, you'd have to use multiple cards. So, I guess I do think that there are songs that he intended to work entirely with occult concepts and to convey an idea using occult concepts, but I don't necessarily think that he was setting out to build the tree of life using his songs. Mm-hmm. But I would not be surprised if eventually he was tickled by the idea of covering all these occult bases and maybe toyed with doing something along the same lines of being able to see esoteric, see the entire compendium of human experience in his work, which you can also do in just about any other divinatory system.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with divination is that seemingly random things can show those same like universal pattern that manifests through them. So in this case, you're using someone's life's work and finding all those archetypes and shapes and systems.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it was really interesting. And I also, there were moments when I thought, am I just a total just uber fan who's lost touch with reality and needs to go outside and touch grass, But there were, every time I would kind of get in that place mentally, I would find another match, another thing where it was like, man, that just conveys that idea so perfectly. It's just such a good fit, such a good way to remember. That honestly, I stopped caring whether or not it was something that he did,
right?
But saw it more as an opportunity to make it more meaningful for myself.
Yeah.
And even after having, been doing this at the time that I was writing it, I'd already been reading tarot professionally for, over 15 years. So if it was bringing new levels of understanding to me, who was doing this every day, I knew it would be of value to somebody. I hoped it would be of value to somebody, and whether it has or not is, I don't really know, but I do know that it made a lot of sense to me. And I know a lot of people who want to learn, and they're looking for ways to learn. So what I hope people will do is that even if they did like pick the book up and browse through it, and maybe Maynard's not their favorite artist, but if it inspires them to go pick up, say, Sting's catalog and do it with his work, mission accomplished.
Right.
It did the same thing.
Right. Like it's essentially this kind of like concept of what you're saying, like the celebrity as an avatar. This idea is essentially that, they could be pulling things from, I guess, from the ether, essentially these ideas, and it matches up with all these other ideas because we're talking about like essential archetypes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of celebrities as avatars was kind of an ancillary concept that came in the course of writing the book. Because what I also noticed at the same time when I was reading through all the lyrics, was that he seemed to be particularly good at conveying deific complexes in his music. Right. He also seemed to have or utilize a lot of symbolism that was unique to Thoth, or highly associated with Thoth, Mercury, Hermes. And then after a while of digging some more, I started going, well, he also has a really strong tie to Mars, Aries, the war associated, aggression associated deities. And then I could see, concepts of the sun and the moon and Saturn, and it spoke to me because my particular deity is Thoth. And so when I'm looking at this catalog, I am seeing evidence of him channeling that energy into his work and into the world. And so therefore, what was attracting me to his work were those qualities. And it matched up with the fact that I already had a strong working relationship with this deific energy. And he just was another expression of that. So it also helped me to kind of put a more constructive perspective on my appreciation for his music and for fandom, because I think a lot of times fandom gets dismissed as being something that's trivial, immature, or silly, or like, get a life or what have you. But art of all kinds conveys important information, and it has been the way that humans have exchanged really deep concepts for all time, things that can't be put into words because they would cheapen them. So being a fan of somebody's artwork is kind of like a meeting of the minds. And if what they're carrying to you consistently brings you closer to an understanding of a deity, then they're kind of working as an emissary on that deity's behalf, whether they realize it or not.
Interesting. So it's not necessarily that like Maynard James Keenan has to be into Thelema or has to be into Thoth. It's just that these concepts are you're working with such universal concepts that you can interpret as a deity, essentially, or concepts related to a deity.
Yeah, or somebody who's whether wittingly or not operating as a vessel for the teachings of that particular deity. And you could make that comparison with pretty much anyone who's a well-known celebrity, regardless of what they're known, what they do, but really more about what they're known for, why we're attracted to them, want to pay attention to them.
Right.
That gives you a clue as to the type of and flavor of energy that they're channeling out into the world.
Well, I do think you chose a good person, because I just recently, really, and just because of reading your book, just kind of listening to Perfect Circle and Pucifer, which I never had really listened to before, other than, songs I'd heard on the radio by Perfect Circle. But Tool, I was really into, and still really like them. And I've really seen them as like, I've seen them as a very kind of intellectual, very mystical band in a lot of ways. So
yeah, absolutely. They definitely are. I don't know of anybody who's putting out stuff that's more esoteric than them, more occult based than they. I mean, not to say that I know all music in and out, but I consider myself to be fairly well versed in mainstream rock music, especially. And I've never, from the 70s on, I've never seen anything that even remotely compares to just the sheer amount of occult data they cram into their lyrics, the musical structure, their set lists, their stage settings, their lighting shows, like the symbols and sigils that are present on stage.
right.
They're famous, they're infamous even for being nobody really understanding what's on stage with them, or what is that weird stuff, but at the same time, when you're especially at a live show and you're really fully immersed into the experience of them, you're receiving information on a subconscious level that's still kind of getting in there, even if you don't consciously get it. The content of the songs is hitting at subconscious receptors for understanding. That's true of all art. We often, you can look at a piece of art, that piece of visual art, and go, that makes me feel a certain way. I don't know why, but it just speaks to me, and that's what's going on. It's the same thing.
Well, I would say, in addition to the occultism, maybe even more so, Tool is often associated with psychedelic use. And what role does that play, and how does that play into the impacts that the music can have, the transmission of this occult data, things like that? I actually just got back from the Bay Area and was at the Psychedelic Art Museum, and they have like the full-size Alex Gray paintings and stuff in there, and I was like, oh wow, these are really big. But since I guess their third album, maybe they've really been incorporating that artwork and like really explicitly psychedelic inspired stuff. How does that all play into this?
I think it absolutely does play into. I think psychedelics are like divinatory tools, in that they help us access pieces of our brains we ordinarily, that our waking minds won't let us fully access, because, to be honest, the amount of information available in those channels is overwhelming, and we don't always have the capacity to process or make sense of them. So our brains kind of don't let us see it all. And I do think that psychedelics are one way of kind of lowering that informational inhibition to let the stuff through. And when we're talking about what kind of stuff is coming through, I mean, we're really talking about, the wisdom, the cumulative wisdom of humanity. Things like we are all one. We are inextricably linked to one another. Our fates are tied together. We are infinitely more complex than we realize. That the stuff that animates us is cause for wonder. We may never fully understand it, but it deserves our respect and our curiosity. Those kinds of things are yes, what's written into the lyrics and baked into the music and the set and the stage, but it's also what you're able to access when you, as Bill Hicks would have said, squeegee your third eye with some psychedelics and start looking at the world beyond what meets your physical eyeballs, and looking with the inner eye to see what else is there.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the association with Kabbalah and the tarot.
Hmm.
This is important because you lay out a lot in the, somebody reads the book, they'll see that you lay out a lot of these cards, and you lay out a lot of like information about the cards. And this is part of the information that you put out. I've heard this before. Your book was like the one I think really explained it really well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, the association with Kabbalah to the tarot itself.
Yeah. So, and thank you. What I put in the book is like Kabbalah kindergarten. There are people who know far, far, far more about Kabbalah, Kabbalah with a K, Kabbalah with a C, Kabbalah with a Q.
Right.
There are people who know far more than I do. So what I did in the book was include a brief introductory chapter on the Kabbalah because I'm hoping that people will avoid the mistake that I initially made, which was thinking that Kabbalah was something extraneous I didn't really need to learn. I could read the cards intuitively and that would be enough. And it was enough for a long while. But essentially what tarot is it's a pictorial Kabbalah, a pictorial representation of the tree of life, which is the graphic that's at the heart and center, the symbol that's at the heart of the concept of Kabbalah. And Kabbalah, for those who are new to this word, it's mystical Judaism, and it's very controversial for people who are not of Jewish descent to work with Kabbalah. However, Kabbalah is fundamental and foundational to all Western esotericism because Judaism is fundamental to all Western esotericism. So in order to understand what's being conveyed in all those old books, you have to understand what's happening in that system.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially the way that the Kabbalah and the tarot are tied to one another is that you can essentially lay out the entire tarot deck into the structure of the tree of life. And so every card has a place that it belongs on the tree. All of the major arcana, let me back up. Let me say this. The tree consists of 10 centers, 10 spheres that are arranged in a very particular shape, and they are connected by a very particular set of pathways between them. And when you overlay the tarot onto that, what it looks like is all of the major arcana cards, of which there are 22. Each one of those occupies a path in between the centers. And then all of the minor arcana cards, the small cards, which are ace through 10 of all four suits, and 4 court cards of all 4 suits, can then be distributed amongst the centers of the 10 centers in that tree. And so all of the aces go in the first sphere, and the 2s go in the second, the 3s go in the third, so on and so forth. And then likewise, the court cards are distributed to specific centers or spheres or sephirot, which is the Hebrew word. The court cards live in certain ones of those too. So when people ask what's the significance between these two systems, they're correspondent to one another. They can be equated with one another, and then can best be used as ways to help you translate. If you understand one system, you can learn the other.
And that's specifically, that system of correspondences is called Hermetic Kabbalah, right? And that was pioneered by the early Golden Dawn members, which then Crowley picks up from them and kind of retranslates with his own system.
Absolutely. And then the Hermeticism has its origins in the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who is a figure that is representative of the combined energetic teachings and lessons of Egyptian Thoth, Greek Hermes, which were synced to one another. The cultures recognized their god in each other, right? So the Greeks recognized Hermes and Thoth and vice versa. So Hermeticism goes all the way back to the teachings of the Egyptian god Thoth, which were Hellenized, and we know them today. Those teachings are encapsulated in a short document called the Emerald Tablet. And from that grew the system, like all of Western esotericism grew from those teachings.
Okay.
Which,
You also,
if you're thinking about the course of antiquity, then you move from the Hellenistic age, and then there's a confluence there between Egyptian culture, Greek culture, and then Judaic culture, and that's kind of a mixing pot, and all of these systems kind of combined their learned spiritual wisdom over time, and that became the field of occultism as we know it now.
okay. You also talk about the four different the four sections of the tree of life, the four Kabbalistic worlds. Yes.
Yeah. So this idea that we can look at the basic building blocks of the universe in terms of elements, and that those elements have a natural progression in terms of existence, that material reality, what becomes material reality starts first as an impulse of God that is then expressed as fire, that is then expressed as its opposite, which would be water, and then down into its composite, which would be air, and then the opposite of that composite, which would be earth. And then those elements get tied into or compared with, corresponded with the levels of the tree, which then are then called worlds. So that you look at those 10 centers on the tree are then divided into 4 sections, top to bottom, and they represent, the original impetus from Godhead of fire, and then down into water, and then a little bit lower on the tree, you get into the world that represents air, and then finally the 10th Sephira corresponds to earth, and that corresponds to the reality that you and I know, what we see, touch, hear, taste, feel here on this plane and in this life.
Oh, that's Malkuth. Is that I think that's the lowest.
Yep.
Lowest sphere. Yeah.
The lowest sphere, and at the same time also the highest, because it produced material things that did not exist, and some of those material things include us, which have the capability of aspiring to think about, learn from, wrap our minds around the divine. So in a way, that kind of makes us the lowest of the low and the highest of the high, because we contain multitude.
As above, so below.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's it. Yep. There it is. So you do something interesting in the book before you start on the journey through the tarot, and you look at some of the albums that he's been involved in, Maynard James Keenan, and correspond to each of those sephiroths. I thought that was interesting how you did that. Is there a way that when you listen to each album, that the words, the feelings, of concepts that were part of each sephiroth and match them up?
Yeah, that's essentially what happened. Is I kind of started thinking about holistically, what is this album about? And that probably reveals more about my age than anything else, because I am still used to listening to music in albums, as products instead of singles. But yeah, there are clear themes on albums when people produce them as albums, as opposed to just putting out singles. And so I started considering all the different albums that he's put out with all the various projects, and are there strong, clear concepts that emerge from these? And if so, what which Sephira, which station on the tree of life would encompass that theme, would hold that theme? And that was how they kind of got distributed through. And I really appreciate you asking me about this, because it gives me a chance to also say that I put some rules in place for myself as part of my game. Because really that's what this started out for, was just a game with myself to see if I could do it. And one of the rules was, it has to be lyrics that are written by him. no cover songs. So one of the things that was that when I started trying to distribute the albums to the Sephiroth, I realized that one really obvious one, which is A Perfect Circles and Motive, it's such an easy slot right into Gevurah because the whole album is war, protest songs. And it just seemed so, it just would have right in there. But the problem is, 9/10 of the album he didn't write. They're cover songs, and so I excluded them in order to remain true to my rules and my limitations and boundaries. The sandbox I was playing in, but it was just summarize this album and then where would it go?
As you laid out the entire tree of life and the correspondences with the tarot, it's obviously really hard for many people, including myself, to memorize these correspondences. So you use the music, which is like near and dear to a lot of people already. They already have probably lyrics and songs, etc., memorized as a tool to help them understand this larger system too.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because there's all kinds of little tricks and methods to doing that. But if it's this like entire body of work that people are already very invested in, that seems like a good way to just learn the entire system.
And the great part about it is that there's usually one line or one couplet in a song that most everyone inherently, instinctually understands is the heart of the song. And that becomes your mnemonic. So that when you flip over the universe or the world, if you're reading a Rider-Waite card, you can then hear in your mind, you can hear him saying, Saturn comes back around. Like it just becomes an easy way of remembering, oh yeah, that card is about discipline and about being taught lessons and the finality of completing a cycle. And so that was a really fun part. And unfortunately for me as the writer, because I am writing about two systems that I didn't create, I didn't have the ability to be able to include all of the. I would have loved to have been able to quote, the lines from each song that would make a good mnemonic. But unfortunately, in order to do that in the world of publishing, you must have license and permission, and those things have expenses attached to them.
Yeah.
And it would have been really cost prohibitive for me to put the book out at all if I was going to give one mnemonic line even from every song. So what I also understood was a benefit of that was actually kind of a happy blessing, is because it allows every person to find that line for themselves. The one that's meaningful to them, the one that they always want to, scream out at the show, the one that they might have tattooed on their body, the one that they tell themselves whenever they need soothing or comfort. It allows it to be unique to you. And so that was kind of a blessing in disguise, even though I was initially disappointed that I couldn't do it. But it allows everyone to be a participant instead of just a passive reader.
Yeah, yeah.
We should say on that note that you do have a playlist on Spotify that people can find, and I'm going to try to link that up in the show notes for people to look at.
Yes.
But they can, if they get your book, or if they want to, or if they want to take a list of like the Thoth Tarot and go through it. You have it in order by the cards.
I do have it in order by the cards. And so if you are a paid subscriber of Spotify, you can listen to the list in its proper order. Unfortunately, if you are a free member of Spotify, it will scramble the list for you. So just a heads up there. I learned that after the fact.
Or you could look at it, and I'm sure a lot of Tool fans probably have every album in physical form.
Oh, absolutely. And then I don't think I used anything off of no, because everything and yeah. I was gonna say I didn't include Salival anywhere, which is the only album that you can't stream.
Right.
But Salival is just a collection of songs that are already released on other albums or they are cover songs. So doesn't matter either.
Yeah, that's where that awesome version of No Quarter is on that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I think it's like a live album, right? I'm pretty sure.
It is.
Yeah.
The live album. And there's also a really good cover of You Lied, Peach. And a really, really, really great version of Push It, which is just outstanding. And that's the one that I really, it breaks my heart that everybody can't or hasn't heard that version of Push It, because I think it is, I think it represents them really finding the heart of that song after touring with it for a while.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could probably, well, I guess I shouldn't say you can find it on YouTube, but people can find these things.
It's really too bad
they're always there.
That one of the old co-host Rob isn't here, because I know he's a really big
I know.
fan. He'll have to check this out later.
Yeah, I know.
He'll be doing your sound likely at the conference.
Yeah. I need to tell him about this. Well, I would ask you about the albums, like doing the albums, corresponding them to the different Sephiroths. Do you find that some of the songs correspond to the same Sephiroth on the cards?
Yes. But it is not universal. So, for instance, the reason why I say that is like for you people who are familiar with the music may notice that on a given album there might be one red herring song, like one song that doesn't really. One of these things is not like the others. Like a great example of that would be Lateralis and Ticks and Leeches. Ticks and Leeches is such a radical departure from the rest of the thematic material on Lateralis, which is so love and light and rise above and evolve and all that. And then Ticks and Leeches is just old school Tool, Wall of Rage, harkening back to old days. And it's kind of like the one song on the album that if you're an old school Tool fan that never really got into the new stuff, it's like, yeah, that's my favorite song on the album. But if you're looking at the album holistically, it's the one song that really doesn't fit. And so therefore, that song is corresponded to a card that matches up with Geburah. But the rest of the album, Lateralis itself, is tied to, I want to say, I have to look back at what I wrote. How am I going to know what I think unless I read what I wrote? Lateralis is Tiferet. Yeah, the heart center of the tree. But the Grudge, the song, is tied to Geburah, which is the war. So yes, sometimes the song matches the same area as the album that it's on, and sometimes not. And I was trying to make sure that I wasn't shoving square pegs in round holes. I was trying to make sure that I was honest and didn't force things that obviously did not work. So that's, again, that's another one of those kind of little game rules that I gave myself in seeing if this theory really could play out, if it could carry water.
So let's go through some of these cards and so that we, the audience gets an idea of what you're doing and like what some of the cards mean, and then like the song that corresponds with what that means. So I guess we'll start at the obvious place, which I guess would be, well, technically card 0, the Fool. So we'll start there.
Yeah, the Fool. So the Fool, the card is it's about beginnings. It's the card's numbered 0, but and so we like to think of it as the first one, but actually it's the card that can go anywhere. And it is the kind of the game piece that represents all of us. This the fool's journey is what the tarot is. And so it represents having absolutely no idea what's coming. You just know you're going on an adventure and you're going to trust the universe and you're going to take that fateful step onto the path or off the ledge. And you're going to trust that whatever comes your way is what's meant to happen. So that's the card. And the song from his catalog that most reminds me of that is A Perfect Circle's Gravity. And if you're familiar with the lyrical content of Gravity, it's written from a perspective of recovery from an addiction. But the one of the most important, most poignant, powerful lines in the song is, I'm surrendering to gravity and the unknown. And that encapsulates the meaning of the Fool. So when a Fool card appears in a reading, it's an acknowledgement of you're heading off into the wilderness. You're going to have experiences that you cannot anticipate. They're going to be new and novel. Some are going to be scary. Some are going to be delicious. Some are going to be beautiful. But they're all part of the ride. And it's the ride that you are on because you got this human body. And that's what the Fool means. And Gravity's wisdom is in reminding us that the only way we grow is to surrender. Surrender the old so that the new can come. And that's fundamental to what the Fool means.
Very cool. Very interesting. We'll move on to, and I'm not going to probably cover all these that I have written down. I just, as I was reading them, I earmarked them so that we could kind of talk about them. But we'll move on to the Magus.
Mm-hmm. So the Magus, or the magician, is in terms of a card, it's numbered 1, and it's representative of coming to identify and understand yourself as a person of will, having your own sense of individuated will, and having power and capability because you're human. It's a universal. We're all, to be fair and to be clear, we're all every single card in the deck at some point in our lives or another. That's the whole point of archetypes. But the Magus specifically is the part of us that is the son or daughter, offspring of God, and therefore imbued with power to influence our own reality by virtue of understanding it and learning it, and then learning how to work with the currents of what's around us. So that's the card. It's also, indicative of things like distinctly human knowledge, bodies of knowledge. So communication, including writing and speech, commerce, which includes things like the ability to persuade and even to do sleight of hand trickery, information and the organization of that information. And it's tied to the planetary force of Mercury, which also encapsulates all these ideas too. So that's the card. And the song that, for me, encapsulates and really puts a fine point on that archetype would be Lateralis, which is the crux of that song is, it's such an important song in the catalog that it's become kind of a salutation for fans. Spiral Out came from this song's lyrics, and kind of the crux of this song comes in the wisdom of we swing on the spiral of this universal structure, and that swinging and that spinning around with with archetypes and parables and symbolism kind of helps us to make sense of the fact that we are simultaneously from the mind of God, as well as made of muck and mire and the basest, most unevolved material substance in the universe, the carbon that makes us up. And so that song expresses the beauty of being able to be both, having human experiences, but also having the ability to reach for and connect with the divine and make meaning and sense out of these human experiences. And that idea is what hits at the heart of the magus or the magician.
Okay. Well, let's move on to a couple of others. And I want to also talk about some that, that are the ones that are kind of different from the Rider Waite deck as well, and why those are different. But we'll talk a little bit of a dichotomy here. So we, the Empress and the Emperor, and kind of what those two cards mean, and the songs that are associated with those.
Yeah. So the Empress and the Emperor are, you could totally say they're a matched pair. They represent the earthly expression of femininity and the earthly expression of masculinity, as well as motherhood and fatherhood, queenship and kingship. They are symbols of what all of us understand masculinity and femininity to be at their core. And thus, the Empress is the generator. She represents fertility and maternity and the ability to knit together cells into a being that will live on its own, and then birth that being, nurture it, and launch it into the world as its own separate entity, right? So she's responsible for that concept is responsible for the idea of creation, just creation. So you can think of the Empress as kind of like the jungle. It's just verdant and fertile and just constantly producing more and more and more life, to the point that forests and the jungle can become overgrown and you can't really walk through it. You can't get through it. It's just this tangled mess of life and organic matter. So that's her function in the universe, archetypally. His function then is masculinity, and which is more associated with, in the Kabbalistic sense, the refinement of that chaos into something that makes sense, into something that might be civilized or ordered, or something that you can understand, that you can wrap your arms around, you can conquer it. Right? So the Emperor is really associated with things like discipline and order, leadership, and civilization, and cities, as we know, cities and states and things. So she births all of the life, the forest, the jungle, and then he comes in and carves out of it a garden with paths and hedges that are trimmed, and flowers that are cultivated. Like, he creates order out of this chaos. So the two of them are matched together and are interdependent upon one another. And the songs, the Empress is the first point, and we're only like 4 cards in, but it's the first time we really start to see some of Maynard's darker takes on songwriting, because for the Empress, I matched to it a perfect circle's Orestes. And Orestes is a Greek myth. It's a character from Greek mythology that kills his mother. And so the lyrical content of that song is about the necessity of throwing off the mother so that you can individuate and become your own person. You don't have that smothering, let me baby you, let me nurture you, let me hold you. It's throwing that off so that you can be your own person and you can heal and break free of the influence of that of the maternal. Anybody who's a fan of Maynard's music knows that he's particularly early in his career was not sunshine and roses. He had a rather dark take on everything, which is okay because for every card, all the cards have both positive and negative. I'm using vigorous air quotes here. Positive and negative connotations. And so it's not inherently a problem that Orestes is a dark take on the mother principle. But it is, and I do acknowledge that in the book. It's not what most people would think of when they think of mommy. And then for the emperor, the mirror image, the other end of the pole, the other pole of the battery, so to speak, I went with Tool's Invincible, which is from Fear Inoculum, their most recent release. And that song is also a darker take on the masculine and kingship because it's discussing the aging process and particularly the aging process from a masculine perception or perspective that in your youth you're invincible, you can do anything, you're powerful, you're virile, you're driven, and you have confidence and you know who you are. And then as you age over time, your body sometimes can betray you. It gets older, it gets weaker, it's been injured, it's not as strong as it once was. And so Invincible really is a song that's kind of acknowledging the masculine life cycle. And it fits with the emperor because the emperor really is the total package of representing what it means to be masculine here on Earth.
Okay. Moving on to some of the ones that I purposely picked these because they're different from the Rider-Waite deck, and that's Lust and Art. So these are like concepts instead of like figures, really.
Yeah.
And then there's one more after this I want to ask you that I found particularly interesting as well. But let's talk about those. What those signify. What were they originally?
So originally in the Rider-Waite, Lust is called Strength. Okay. And when you look at the card, you usually see a depiction of a woman subduing a lion in some way, either sitting on it, like sitting next to it with her arm around it, or her hands in its mouth, or sometimes even on a leash, so in some way controlling it. And the concept of the card Strength was your higher self overcoming your lower tendencies, your base tendencies with something that's more evolved and higher and more aspiring toward the light. And that's a very Christianized kind of way of looking at discipline. In the Thoth deck, that card is called Lust. And it is, rather than being about restraint in the Strength card, it's about the joyous experience of having a physical body, and the energy that can generate, the magic that can generate, the force that can be generated via the sacral center of the human body. That is what's being elicited by the Lust card in the Thoth deck. And in terms of song for that card, that one is kind of funny because I waffled on it a few times about what it ought to be. Because there were a couple of different songs, particularly from Pussifer, that could have fit here. And I eventually wound up going with Queen Bee. Because Queen Bee it's lyrically very simple, but it paints this very vivid picture of coitus, of in a very particular format of coitus, in which the feminine is astride and riding the masculine. And that song I tied to that card because the card, no matter what deck it's in, if it's in the Thoth tradition, has both a woman who is representative of the goddess Babylon and a lion who represents the beast. The two of them are a matched pair. They represent the divine, the feminine and the masculine when they combine. So kind of like an idea of what the emperor and empress produce when they come together. Magically, in a sex magic kind of a way. That sometimes produces life. Sometimes produces joy. Sometimes produces comfort. Sometimes even produces art, right? So that's the lust card. And then the art card in the Rider-Waite deck is called Temperance. Meaning most people interpret the Rider-Waite Temperance card to be about moderation, about keeping it in the middle, keep it balanced. Don't go too far to either extreme, but learn how to find the center and stay there. And Crowley didn't necessarily agree with that interpretation, rather saw temperance as kind of the opposite, exposing yourself to the extremes in order to strengthen yourself against the extremes, and then thus create a strong, sound middle balance point between them. Not by avoiding them, but by exposure to them. So when we think about tempering steel to make a weapon, you plunge it into the fire, get it super, super hot, and then you plunge it into water again, cool it off very quickly. And it's exposure to those two extremes that strengthens the metal, right? So for art, the Pussifer song Augustina is the song that reminds me the most of art, because it is describing all of the miracles that have to line up just so in order for a child to be born, for a child to be conceived, gestated, born, and raised. There are millions of tiny little miracles that must happen, and the stars must align just so. Pregnancy and having children and that sort of thing is seen as so commonplace in our psyches that we sometimes lose sight of the spectacular miracle that must take place. And it happens because two distinct entities came together and produced a third distinct entity that is neither one of them but a combination of the two. It is alchemy, what we esotericists would call alchemy, an alchemical process. And that is what the art card is, the art of alchemy, the art and science of combining disparate materials to see what they will produce when they are exposed to one another. And for anybody who's studying the occult, you're getting a hefty dose of Hermetic Kabbalah, but you're also getting a rather hefty dose of alchemy, because that science was a direct medieval outgrowth of Hermetic Kabbalah or Hermeticism.
Yeah, you are right about that. We never really think about that. The 1 + 1 = 1 idea or concept, Yeah,
and it's easy to lose sight of, but it's the core of every single magical operation. It's the core of everything, every process that produces anything new. which then also must expand your understanding of what magic is to something far, far broader than what we would ordinarily think of it as. Magic is something that happens anytime we cause change in our environment. Magic with the K, right? So it's not just when you know, robe up and, you know, say all the words and chant all the things. It's when you do something as simple as buy a scratch off ticket and say, I feel lucky today. Scratch it off and win $50.
Right.
Same thing.
About intention.
And all of those are a result of putting together, you know, money and a piece of paper, and it created a win.
Well, one final one we'll talk about real quick is the star. And this one was one that I actually, no pun intended, starred, because I thought that the way you interpreted this was interesting. This is not one that the name has changed from the Rider-Waite deck, but you saw a lot of like goddess connotation in this card in particular.
Yeah. The star is kind of it is a goddess, and it's in, at least in the Thoth tradition, it's Nuit, who is the goddess of the sky. She's represented as kind of the Milky Way arching over our night sky is her body. And she swallows and gives birth to the sun every day. And the Thoth idea of the star is tied to her, and how she represents the sweetness of hope and faith and clarity and vision for the future and what could be, being able to visualize what could be, even if it's not necessarily here yet, or we don't have the capacity to understand it. It's faith in something larger than ourselves. And the card, the song that I saw most clearly, kind of full of little Easter eggs that relate to the lore of the star, is Pussifer's Grand Canyon, which is a stunningly beautiful, absolutely gorgeous song about the awe that is inspired by standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and looking at the Grand Canyon and saying what everyone who's gone to the Grand Canyon inevitably says is, holy God, that is a big fucking hole.
Yeah, it's impressive.
It is really. It's mind-boggling to look down at the little placard guide at the lookout point and locate a peak, and then realize that peak that looks like you could practically reach out and touch it is 40 miles away.
Yeah, it's
mind-exploding, and that is kind of what the star is. That's what that archetype is. It's coming to understand that it's so much bigger. We are so tiny, so very, very small by comparison to the breadth of the universe. And that can be terrifying, but it's also massively comforting to know that there's something so much bigger out there, that it's not just on me and my little human brain to figure it all out and to do all the things and to make everything right. I'm just here. I'm playing my part and my role. But the star card also occupies in the Thoth tradition a really interesting position on the tree of life, and that is it kind of skirts the edge of what is known as the abyss. Likewise, the song Grand Canyon really is kind of that same experience of standing on the edge of an abyss and wondering at the sheer magnitude, and wrapping your mind around infinity, or trying to even grasp for it. It's a holy experience. It's something that changes you. It changes your perspective on who you are and where you belong. And that's very much what the song is about. And if you've never heard the song, I highly encourage you to listen to it, especially if you've never seen the video. Go to YouTube and watch Pussifer's official video for Grand Canyon, and that will deliver the fullness of the experience of the archetype.
Sometime I'd like to get you on with talk about this beyond the scope of this discussion, but like the idea of Babylon and the goddess relationship and Thelema, like I'd love to talk about that sometime.
Oh yeah,
I think that's part of that concept as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would totally love to do that. And you're right. It's something that could be its whole other thing unto itself.
Yeah, its own discussion. Well, one final question. You do list some ways, and like, what are some practical ways to use the Maynard Tarot? Things that you list, kind of some of the ones that you list out.
Yeah. I really love the idea of divination using music. So one of the ways that you can engage this system in a way that's fun and relevant to you is to think of a question that you would ask if you went to a tarot reader, and then shuffle and hit play on that playlist. And the song that comes up is the answer. The answer. And again, the vigorous air quotes. I know that this is audio only, so it's the response needed for the question that you asked. That's a really great way of working with this system, because it also I particularly like to do, instead of just asking a question, doing a one-off reading for yourself, you can make it into a daily practice where you, in the morning before you get your day started, you ask the universe what it is you need to know. What do I need to know for today? And then hit shuffle and play and see maybe what are the first two songs that play, and consider the cards that are tied to those two songs and watch for. I find that it's more informative to draw two cards every day instead of just one. And that's just because I feel like two cards really gives you a better sense of the flavor of the energy of the day, what's going to happen, and what the flavor of it will be. So asking for guidance for the day and taking either the first song or the first two songs as your answer is another way. And then you've got Maynard lyrics in your head all day, and you're like bopping to the song and you're going about your day, and then things happen in the course of your day, and then you go, oh, there it is. There's the tie-in with the song. And if you're like a really big music fan, there are some people who are like really into music, so much so that they kind of think and speak in song lyrics. Like, if you've ever met a really like over the top fan of somebody, some people do movie quotes, some people do musical lyrics. But the point is, as you experience your day, you're going to run into these instances where the song pops into your head, and it makes the card make sense. And then you see it not just as a 2-sentence platitude definition in a little white book that comes with the deck, but it actually manifests. You understand what it looks like on the ground in your life. So the Three of Swords could manifest for you as a flat tire. It could manifest for you as a headache or a migraine. It could manifest as you cutting yourself while working on a wood project. The point is, you're getting to experience your life alongside of your music, alongside of the tarot card. And that's how you begin kind of training your brain to remember what those cards mean, so then you don't have to rely on a book.
This was a really great discussion. I'll admit I'm not the biggest Tool fan myself, but it still was really interesting, and we're really. You did
say earlier, Sergio, that people could use this as a tool.
Absolutely. I mean,
no pun intended.
They aptly named their band.
We're really looking forward to you being at the conference, and as we talked a little before we started recording, we wanted to have some tie-ins with larger fandoms and pop culture. We think that that's a great introduction to some of these topics. I know we get real just like heady and research based, and we could probably do a little better at that. So thank you for helping us out with that as well.
Well, thank you guys. I'm really really excited. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm super excited for November and looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, Kyndyll, where can people find you, your web presence, and where people can get the book?
They can get the book on Amazon. The book is available in ebook and print versions in the United States and Canada. Again, that's a licensing thing. So I'm licensed to distribute this book in those two countries, and it is on Amazon. And if you want to come and see me and get a reading with me, you can come to Aroma G's Botanica right near the airport in Nashville on Fridays. I'm the Friday reader all day. You can come as a walk-in. You don't even have to make an appointment. If you can't do Fridays, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I use the same handle all three places. Is MKYNDYLLLACKEY. So it's M Kyndyll Lackey. And when it's spelled correctly, there'll be 3 L's right there in a row. And Kyndyll is spelled with Y's.
All right. And go ahead, Kyndyll. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. And then my website is also the same thing, mkyndyllackey.com.
Okay. And also you can see Kyndyll at speaking at the Strange Realities Conference this year, November 1st. And
get your tickets now.
Get your tickets now. They are available.
Now. Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be included. Thank you so much.
Thank you. They are finally available. $70 for in-person in Nashville, $30 for online, just like the last few years. We haven't gone up on the price. So it's a good deal. You guys just get to Nashville, come to Nashville. That's the place to be and the best way to experience it. And more information is going to be up on strangerealitiesconference.com very soon, if not by the time that this comes out. Also, Surfiel, you can tell everybody where they can find our Patreon if they want to support what we do.
You can find that at patreon.com/Conspirinormal. We are getting back into these at least semi-monthly single Strange Realities presentations, streaming only events. Those we opened up for the $5 level last time. We don't know quite yet what we're going to do on the next one. If you missed Greg Bishop's talk on alien language, you can see that over there as well, just at the $5 level. That's on patreon.com/Conspirinormal.
Well, actually, we should make the announcement. May 29th, Justin McHenry will be doing a presentation. So stay tuned for more info on that as well. But that'll be May 29th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So stay tuned for that. And thank you, Kyndyll, for being on. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And we will be back on Conspirinormal.